All right, guys, and welcome back. This is the Total Potential podcast. I'm sitting here with one of the first channels that I would consider myself to be a fan of. So, without fangirling too much, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Um, Heath from Red Poppy Ranch. I don't know what else to say other than that, I guess.
A plumber, a family man, a dog or puppy lover now. Big shout
Yeah,
out
for
to
sure.
the dog. And I know it's been a big part of your life as a companion. We don't want to see you, we want to see the dog.
She's sleeping on the couch. I'll have to run
Nice,
and grab her in a
nice.
second
Okay.
here.
Okay. So coming to that land, I know from your entire life, coming from having to rent and someone like me in my position, my grandmother has always taught me, you don't pay for something unless you have the cash for it, right? And that's the same type of philosophy that I was taught as far as, owning land and investing in your own property and, you know, coming into a situation like yours with totally off the grid. How did you get inspired to get into that sort of lifestyle?
I don't. I would love to tell you that I had this 5-year, 10-year plan, and I had everything mapped out to where I am here today. But the truth is, I have a tendency to look to about the weekend and not a whole lot further than that. But what I've talked about it in a video or two before. When I was in my probably late teens, early documentary called, there's a couple of them, but the one that I saw back then was called Alone in the Wilderness. Nick Prinicky that, he ended up getting diesel fuel in his eyes. This is in the mid 60s, and he got fuel in his eyes. I think he was a subcontractor for the Army living in Alaska, and he lost his eyesight for a minute. And I think he was an avid outdoorsman anyway. And he basically just packed it all up, and he went out and he built a cabin in the woods. And he was a craftsman. I mean, in his 50s, you watch this video, and he shot it all in 16 millimeter film. And then somebody else actually dubbed all the audio over the top of it. But you look at the dude's arms in that he's got pipes on him, and he's probably mid to late 50s. And something about that struck a chord with me. But the irony is he was always alone. And the truth is, see, I bought all of his journals. I bought everything I could about that guy, and I read everything I could. And the truth is, the longest he would typically stay out there by himself was like 3 months. And then he would, they like the wilderness survival stuff. I spent 3 months in the woods in Arizona when I was 18, but I was never alone. I was with a group. And being alone we're not designed to be alone. I think his kids were all grown and
Distancing right
gone.
now. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know what, dude? That hasn't affected us a whole lot up here.
Well, I'm talking about more from like a
We
macro societal standpoint of our needs as a society now that we've entered into a social media contactless era, right? And I think, you mentioned a little bit of the millimeter of camera that the gentleman was using. And I think this is one of the highlights of getting the opportunity to interview you, is because I think one thing that you don't talk a lot about is that documentation and technology side, right? That whether or not it was you, on your phone, just kind of documenting your experience out there to show, your mother-in-law or, whoever you were doing it originally for. But did that also come into the picture as far as seeing him document it? And did that aspect also inspire you to document it? Or what was that prefaces to that?
It was my kid's idea. It was my kid's idea to start a YouTube channel.
Oh, wow.
I think it was I think it was a way to kind of keep in contact with my family back in Arizona. Both my wife's family and my family is all back home in Arizona. And truthfully, my dad was raised not far from where our place is here. And I think I always had, I've always been a bit of a dreamer, a bit of a,
Visionary.
yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but I was always looking, I was always, I guess I was never satisfied. We bought and sold a whole bunch we've never lost money in real estate. This piece of land that we have now, this home that we have now, this is the first time in my adult life where I've stopped looking at the next project, right?
Yeah, and
Like
your inspector suggested
you
just
know,
go ahead and sell it and move back to town, right?
yeah. I mean, he's thinking about it from a practical standpoint. He knows
Sure.
how hard it is to live up here.
Yeah, but
He knows
your
that
blood is inside that dirt, you know? And I think
yeah,
that that's
it,
what a lot of people don't understand, coming from my situation with an acre and a half. My neighbors got 5. I was a Cub Scout, but not just a regular Cub Scout, a Cub Scout in the middle of nowhere, right? We're shooting black powder cannons through, refrigerators with wood in them and, chainsaws at, all kinds of fun. Cheese balls, we
the way
take,
you should
410s and
go.
22s and shoot cheese balls out of the sky. And so, I have had some experience with dirt. And I think, people talk a lot about, healthcare, right? But I think what would really do a lot of people good in a lot of other situations where they just don't have access to dirt, and also dirt that they own. That it's one thing to go to a park, where it's manicured, it's, like, for example, the land that I was visiting over the past week at my uncle's place, that it is virgin ground, and it is up a hill, right? So it's kind of funny how this all, comes together where, um, it's sad. It's really sad, that it's almost a human right to own some dirt. In a perfect society, I'm not saying like, we're gonna be able to, make that happen, but at least what we can aspire to, you know, because renting is just throwing away
the
money. Renting is just throwing away money.
the the I listen to lots of books, and I listen to, I have this philosophy where I want to learn, I want to better myself as much as I can, but I'm my own worst critic. I'm part of the reason I've always got earbuds in is because the conversations I have with myself are probably not the best, right? They're not the most uplifting conversations, and so my older brother was obsessed with Louis Lamour. And matter of fact, he has a personal letter written to him from Louis Lamour right a year or two before Louis Lamour died. I think my brother was 14 or 15, and he
Excuse
wrote him a
me,
letter, and
just for
Louis Lamour
those of you who
responded.
may not know, who is that?
Yeah, Louis Lamour is probably the single most published Western author in the world. I think second only to maybe Zane Grey. He writes. He was a Western writer. Started out writing short stories in the 40s and 50s, and then he started writing some of his best work, in my opinion, is what's called the Sackett Series. And the very first Sackett book starts out with it's right around the fifth. This man basically trying to escape England to get to the New World over here, and it's all about owning land, and it's all about you know part of the book talks
Pioneering,
about how
pioneering,
he
being a pioneer.
yeah but even in that book again, and what's interesting is Louis L'Amour was accused of basically taking the Daniel Boone story and harvesting some of that out of there. And I don't know how true that is, but that book is so. The first few books, there's one called I just finished it the other day. It's called Far Blue Mountains, and it's all about freedom. It's all about the right to carve out your way of life at your expense, regardless of the challenges, regardless of the outcome. And the problem with reading books like that is I start to, I would love to have lived 150 years ago when you could file for the Homestead Act and get some land, and all you had to do was prove up the land. You had to build a cabin and you had to plant something. Now it's romantic from 2020 to look back on that and go, I would love to do that. But the truth is, it was a hard scrabble life. People starved to death, literally trying to homestead on their own land. And so, what we've done here at our place, I don't feel that the only thing I've done is I haven't stopped, right? I don't feel that I have any particular skills any better than anybody else. I don't feel that, I guess I would just say that the only thing I can do, and I'm prepared to do, and I'm willing to do more than most people, is just work my ass off, right? I'm going to work. And literally, it's almost killed me in the last few years. I got really sick. I lost
You got
almost
hit
60
in the back of
pounds.
the head by
And
that beam on the outside the addition on the back. I mean, that was scary. I've got bad back issues. My neighbor's got a wood burning furnace. He used to work me like a dog when I was a kid. That's why I'm in media now, because I got scarring on my bone and tissue, and I'm a little girl. But yeah, I mean, but that hard work, is still in me, and I think that it comes out, and I was even talking how you mentioned, 100 years ago. I almost feel like we need to write our own constitution, right? An updated constitution in a sense, but whereas similarly to the folks that left the British colonies, my grandparents left Austria, Romania, and Hungary, right? My opa owned a
sure.
bar, my oma owned a convenience store. The Russians came in, the German army said, hey, you got to leave. To this day, there are other people in our property. So, and I see that approaching, and I'm looking at it like, do I need to go buy some land in the Virgin Islands or 2 miles off of Africa and, get an island or, a red poppy ranch type of situation up on the top of a hill somewhere or, that I think if you're playing basketball and people aren't playing by the rules, you got to take your ball and go home. You don't just keep on playing and getting pegged with the ball or getting, knee checked with the ball or, fouling or, you take your ball and you go home, right? That, they took my
You never
property
played
once,
basketball with me and my
that
brother.
I'm taking my ball and going home, right?
Yeah,
And
yes
that's
and
where that
no,
visionary
right?
comes
I
in,
grew up
right?
with,
The nutty side.
well, I think part of my story is the fact that I grew up with four brothers and two sisters in a house that was about 1,200 square feet. Okay. We had five boys in one room. We had two sets of bunk beds ranging in age from probably 18 all the way down to like 7, my little brother. And me and my brothers fought constantly every day. My dad was gone to work. My dad was never around. He had church responsibilities. He was never around. And you cram five boys in one room, there's conflict. And the one thing that we all did is we played basketball. My dad was passionate about basketball. So the idea of taking my ball and going home wasn't an option. I had to learn to either take a beating or give a beating. And most of the time I was taking a beating. And so I think part of my drive and part of why we are here where we're at stems from people telling me you shouldn't do that. You can't do that. Nobody's ever done that. You're crazy to do that. There's a reason why nobody's ever built a house up there. All these things. Every time somebody says that to me, there's two things that happen. There's in my brain, I tell myself I'm on the right track. Whenever there's resistance, I'm reminded that I'm on the right track. And the second aspect of it is now that we're getting to where we're getting things figured out. We're this will be our second full winter up here.
Comfortable.
We know what we're in for. Yeah, but now all of a sudden the irony is now more people are trying to do what we're doing up here. And our land was part of an old ranch, and I could have bought, 10 years ago, I could have bought this entire section, 600 plus acres, for what I paid for my land. They couldn't give this land away up here.
Government
It's
grazing or something
hillside.
like that, right? Like the cows
It,
grazing.
it, yeah, that's just above us. That's the BLM that's just
Okay.
above us. But this land is this section of land was part of a ranch that I think the family lost it in a bankruptcy, and they then somebody came in and bought it for next to nothing. They cut it up into I think 8 or 9 lots. And when we bought our land 5 years ago, there was a couple of people that would camp up here in this area. There was one, actually, the person that owned our land before us put a little small camp trailer. If you go
Yeah, I
back and
remember.
watch
Yeah,
some
I
of
know
our
the camp.
earliest videos,
Yeah.
okay, so they tried to live in that little tiny cab over camp trailer for like 2 weeks or something like that in the snow. I never met them. I never saw them. They supposedly got a Suburban stuck in the mud up here,
Well, they didn't have a
and they were
friend with
stuck
a
up here for two
bulldozer
weeks.
like you, right? Down the street. That
They
was
didn't
the
have any.
biggest part. That your life changed after you found that bulldozer, right?
It started with the bulldozer. We
That
rented
yeah.
that bulldozer, and then I got a backhoe. I worked out a deal with New Holland for about a year, and that was again, this is all a direct result of hard work, because at that time I couldn't afford to spend $160,000 on a backhoe, and we were in the middle of a TV deal at that time. We've had a few TV shows
Oh
offered
wow.
to us. We were in the middle of a HGTV show, and but the one smart thing that I did during that time was I reserved the right to continue to play around with YouTube. And I think at that time we had like 350 subscribers.
Wow.
I worked out this deal. New Holland really took a chance on us, and to this day, I don't talk with those guys anymore. But to this day, I'm grateful for them for taking a chance on us, because back then we didn't have a whole lot to offer. Now every morning I get an email, or I get a half a dozen emails from some company trying to get me to talk about their products on our channel. And we're very, very, very particular about the products that we endorse. And so the bigger our channel has gotten, the more money we've made off our channel, the less I do that stuff, the less partnerships I take on. And so anyway, I get that backhoe. That backhoe allowed me to do two critical things that literally that first year, we didn't have water. Water was the big concern, and then the other thing was the septic system. Okay, and I started getting bids to have work done up here, and not only could I not afford it at that time, because we've chose to do this all out of pocket,
Yeah,
and
and I would also like to preface this to everybody too, that you have a background in plumbing, correct?
yeah, I'm a plumbing contractor,
Yeah, so
but
this
that's
isn't
it.
buku
I've never,
bucks. This is a man putting in the hours and providing and saving, and putting it, and it's funny how a lot of times that you say, every time you say this, you go, oh well, I could have paid somebody to do this, but you know what, I just decided to do it on my own. All right, we saved money. That it's like
well,
I love it. You're doing
well,
it on your own.
the truth is, as much as it would be nice to sit back and subcontract everything, I'll tell you this much: I would not have the connection to this piece of ground had I subcontracted every
Yeah,
piece.
that's what I
I've
was gonna
done
say.
every
Yeah,
app.
absolutely. And you're gonna stay here.
When you
If
say,
you weren't gonna stay there, then there would be no reason. Then yeah, sure, hire everybody in, no problem. But if it's somewhere where you're gonna spend the rest of your life, that it's your legacy.
to me, it's like the idea of doing this again. Like there's part of me that goes, my brother-in-law was up here last weekend, and my brother-in-law, he goes, so what happens when somebody comes along and offers you $1.5 million for your place? Are you going to do it again? And I jokingly think about that, because there's things I would do different with this place. Knowing what I know now, there's
Oh
things
yeah,
that I would
yeah,
do different.
yeah.
But there's part of me that wonders if I could do. I don't know if I could physically do this again.
Well,
So
you would
even at a
hire some
million,
of it out, but you would do the design. And I mean, not saying that you
you know
would
what?
want to
And
become like
again,
a real estate company and do like your own, designs by Red Poppy Ranch or something, but or made by Red Poppy Ranch, or that the rustic type of style, but Yeah, I mean, I think like your wife wanted the house to be in the middle of the property, different things like that where um I'm trying to think like the trees that you had to remove, like the grandfather tree that you couldn't use, or and
Yeah,
that
that
was
that
like
tree.
my first question actually, was do you like that you went up a mountain versus the flat land? Because I know initially you were looking at some flat land. Are you are you glad that you got the high upland, to that challenge, or do you wish that you would have gone more flat land?
Oh, it most certainly would have been easier if it was
Yeah,
flat. There's no question about it. But there's no challenge.
yeah,
If I can stand in the middle of my property and do a 360-degree turn and see everything that I own, there's part of me that's kind of boring to me,
yeah,
right? Like there's still places on my property I've never been. I get back to where I think the corner markers are, and I can't. I lose because it's so heavily treed. I lose my place. Um, I still think there's a spring on the back of my property. I'm almost positive there is. Matter of fact, I've flown my drone back there half dozen times trying to look around. It is so thick back there that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to figure out this land.
yeah,
And so that if I sold the place, let's just say I sold the place and I was able to buy another piece of land similar to this. And even if I sat back, even if I had $1.5 million in the bank and I sat back and I subcontracted out, and let's say the house is even better than this house, the end result is not the same. The end result is I don't have the connection. My kids don't have
emotional.
the connection. My wife
Yeah.
doesn't have the connection, and that changes things. And so I don't see how I could ever sell this place
You could design other
and feel good
homes
about
and
myself.
then sell those other homes that aren't your exact home, and then sell those other things that you then subcontract, so then you don't have to sell
Yeah,
your place, but then you clone it out to other spots, But not that you want to do that,
because
but so let's get into another, run of the mill question. What is your short and long term goals, right? How you were talking about, people have questioned you selling it, but it's also just jealousy. You know what I'm saying? Like you're in heaven, right? That it's people saying, "Oh, well, why don't you sell this?" It's like, who are you? Like, why did I do all this work? Like,
right.
why are you trying to tell me to sell my land? Like, that's like disrespectful in a sense, But they're also kind of trying to give you
Well,
some shit.
everybody has the truth
Yeah,
is about what we're doing up here. Everybody and their mother has an opinion, and nobody's done it.
yeah,
And so everybody wants to tell me what they think I should do. And this is part of the reason why I don't read YouTube comments. My wife does. She skims through the comments just to make sure that there's nothing
yeah,
inappropriate because her 90-year-old grandmother reads the comments,
yeah,
and so Cedar sees them. I interact with people on Instagram and Facebook a little bit, but this comes from being the little brother, right? You get told what to do your whole flipping life. Pretty soon, you don't want to hear from anybody. And even if I have to go back and fix things, even if I've made mistakes, in which I have, I've made mistakes along the way, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. And so, um, this is the single most, other than being a husband and a father, this is the single most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. Okay. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Physically, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. You asked me about short term and long term goals. Um, you know, I, for the last 10 years, I've been a part of an industry that's very goal oriented. And I'm typically a very goal oriented person, but I have long term goals. I know what I want to happen in 5 years. I know what I hope will happen. And what I used to do, I have a whiteboard in our master bedroom, and I used to put the 5 year goal out there or the 1 year goal out there, and then I backtrack and I cut it up into baby steps. And I say, okay, for me to accomplish this thing, I have to be willing to do the daily activities that are going to get there. And if I'm not willing to put the daily activities, if I'm not willing to put the effort daily into this, then I can't be surprised when in 5 years I don't have what I thought I would have. And the other part of it is being realistic. Um, the I again, I'm a dreamer, So I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you what my 5-year goal is, because in 5 years we'll do this again if we haven't done it a few times in between, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm hoping. I know what I hope is going to happen, but I'm not going to say it out loud. My wife knows what
Sure.
how most of our problems get solved. But go ahead.
Well, and that's what I was about to say. Cedar's made it pretty easy. That she's pretty nice. That I can see. Great design. Helped you out with the pantry. I mean, all the different elements that I can't really think of. I'm trying to think of.
She's the glue.
I'm trying to
She
think
she's the
how
magic.
are you guys gonna get up the hill? Like, have you guys been? Because I know you guys got that deal potentially with the gravel pit down the road, but did they actually ever follow through with their word on giving you like discount gravel for your road?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a touchy subject right now. The
That's what
road
I'm
that
worried
we're
about.
on
When you
is a
said
county.
snowstorm, that's where my mind went. I was like, oh no.
No, but truthfully, once the ground freezes, it's fine. I'll tell you, the hardest part of living up here is the springtime when the snow melts. And no, it's going to be a challenge for years to come. And I'll probably end up having to buy a probably a belly dump or something. And I'm looking at them all the time. I'm just not quite
Or
ready
what
to
about like a truck
drop
with
15 or
tracks
20.
or something like that? Like one of those like ridiculous trucks with tracks or something, which would be ridiculous,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The snowcats.
a
There's snowcats all over
snowmobile,
around here for sale.
or a jet
Yeah,
ski, a mud
snowmobiles.
jet ski.
The problem is my kids go to school every single day, and
Uh-huh.
so what we've done is we've just tried to make their cars, as you know, my oldest daughter that lives here with my second oldest daughter that still lives at home, Cheyenne. Her little Cherokee, I put pretty aggressive mud tires on it,
Sure.
and we have a bit of a system when she leaves the house. When she gets to town, she shoots me a text letting me know that she made it to town. When she's leaving town coming here, she shoots me a text, "Hey, I'm on my way home." And so far so good.
Yeah.
It's going to be years and years before this road is not a challenge. And there's part of me that is okay with that, because the more we improve this road, the more traffic we get up here.
Yeah, yeah. And the more
And
people that
so,
move in, the
uh,
more pressure there is going to be to fix the road. So once the road gets fixed, it's kind of like, well, then what? Yeah.
yeah,
We're running out of
the
space.
quote we had 5 years ago. Yeah, the quote we had 5 years ago to bring power up here was something like 350 to $400,000.
Yeah.
And if there gets to be enough demand for it up here, the power company would bring it up here. But I don't have any desire whatsoever to make that. We've invested ourselves in the solar
Yeah.
and getting that figured out to where we
Oh,
don't.
and you got
The
you have
idea,
new batteries coming, or so you're gonna, because
yeah,
in one of the last episodes you cleared out the storage room to put in the freezer. I was like, well, why didn't you just put the freezer in the shop? But then you probably just wanted to clean out the storage room, and that was an excuse to do it. But uh, so you're upgrading your from the lithium batteries to a more solid state battery, or what is it exactly?
same battery, same company.
Oh, really?
It is a purpose built. Um, it is one of the things that we've discovered along the way with the solar being completely off grid. There is companies that make inverters, there's companies that make batteries, there's companies that make solar panels. There are very, I'm not aware of another company that makes an inverter and a battery that are designed to work
Yeah.
together. Now
Yeah.
that being said, these batteries that we have will work with just about any inverter, as long as it's been updated. But this system, the new batteries that we put in, instead of having 16 different batteries like we do now, we'll have 3 huge batteries. And they're the same technology as the lithium. They call it, what do they call it? LIFEPO4, I think is what it is. Lithium iron phosphate is the technology in the batteries, which I still believe is the best technology out there.
Oh, yeah.
But
Have you seen graphene batteries?
I'm not
Or
sure if I have.
it's a new technology that what they do is they take graphite and then they put like as if it's like tape, and then they strip off the thin layer of graphene, It's what Elon Musk is working on his white papers, but we'll have that conversation another day. But graphene batteries, look out for graphene batteries. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's the problem. The technology is changing so much right
yeah,
now
and talking to
with
my
batteries. So
uncle, talking about big investments, that I was on that property, 8 acres, and he said that there is a flat spot up on the hill where it's not on his property, but the other guy wanted to build a house up there, and they said to run a driveway up the hill would be like $250,000.
yeah, I don't pay people to do
Yeah, exactly.
stuff
Like I
like
feel
that.
like that would be so much easier than that because my neighbor, Doug, you guys would get along real well. He works for the township, right? So as long as we have an excuse to take out, a piece of equipment, but I think back to what you were talking about, people putting limits on you. And guess what? If I'm playing basketball, I don't like getting shit from the coach, right? Like that type of criticism doesn't help me. But from a family member that loves me, I love hearing that sort of type of criticism where, these are people that actually know me. They're not actually trying to hurt my feelings. They just genuinely think I can't do this, and then I can prove them wrong. $250,000 for a driveway. Okay, all right, let's see what I can do with that.
Yeah, well, that buys a lot of equipment, and there's just some people that aren't willing to do. The bottom line is, what I've done up here. There's just there's a lot of people out there that aren't willing to put the effort into something like this. That's probably the number one message we get on YouTube or Instagram or somewhere, that people say, hey, we would love to have what you have, but we would never do what you've done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and part of it is people don't have the time. I was incredibly fortunate, incredibly blessed to create a business that has given me the time in the day I mean, I haven't had a normal job in almost 10 years. And so my background is plumbing in construction. I'm a plumbing contractor by trade, but I haven't done plumbing in 10 years. And so as a trade, but the end result is, when it comes to a piece of ground, when it comes to a piece of raw land, especially, this was a piece of raw land that had never been touched. It had never been manipulated by human hand. Matter of fact, all the trees that were on the property were considered invasive trees, these maple trees that we have. And if you drive past our property and you get up to the Forest Service, you can see where the Forest Service has not only clear cut the property, but someone told me that they even came in and with helicopters, they sprayed something like that to try and keep the trees from coming back. So literally, there's a line where the maple.
That's great.
Yeah, I guess now that I think about that, I'm not sure if that really happened, but they clear cut it and they burned it about 5 years ago. I know that for a fact. And actually, what happened was one of the while they were burning it, the fire got out of control and it almost burned. That's part of the reason I thinned the trees around our house. But my point is, sure, the deeper I got into this, the more I saw potential. Right? It's hillside. It's most definitely not the most preferred piece of ground. At least it wasn't back then. But now, the irony is, now multiple people have or are in the process of doing what we did, because now people can see there's possibility. But the end result is there's this theory that we are made up of electrons and neutrons and protons, and so is the Earth, right? So you walk around barefoot in the woods, there's something mentally that happens to you. The most peace, my brain doesn't stop, okay? When I think I was a freshman in high school, this is back in the 90s, I had a counselor tell my mom that I needed to be on Ritalin. And that was back when they were just starting to use Ritalin. And thank goodness my mom didn't do it, and I can remember sitting in my English classes and in my math classes and just staring out the windows and just thinking about whatever. I would often write short stories that were almost always Western pioneer themed short stories. And by accident, one time I turned one of those stories into my driver's ed teacher. and he happened to be friends with my dad. My dad taught at the same high school I went to, and I'd known this teacher my whole life, and he read that short story and he gave it back to me. And he said, "Look, you turned in the wrong assignment. I need whatever." He said, "But you have to enter that short story writing. There was a writing competition of some kind coming up." And I said, "No way, no way. That wasn't for you. You weren't supposed to read that. That was for me." And I never did. I never did anything with that. And the irony is, I somehow graduated from high school. I watched my older brothers. I have two older brothers that are attorneys. I have a brother-in-law that's a surgeon. I watched these guys go to school for decades, and I wasn't interested. And so when I was 19 or 20, I started training as an apprentice to be a plumber. By the time I was, 21, 22, Cedar and I got married. I was 21. By the time I was 22, I had a kid. And the idea of going to college didn't appeal to me, didn't interest
Yeah,
me.
you'd rather
But
be
I
playing
made
pool, right? You'd rather be playing pool than going to frat parties, right? Me too. I'm not
I I had to quit playing pool when my oldest daughter was born, but quit hanging out with pool halls, I should say. But I, I have nothing against. My dad was very well educated. He when he when he quit teaching, he could have taken the time to get into a program, and he could have gotten his PhD. He had everything finished as far as getting everything out of the way. He was the smartest person I knew personally. He was the most well-educated person I knew, and he was also the most well-rounded. He was reasonable. He was not, I've met I've met academics that profess to be experts in whatever field they're experts in, but they wear Velcro shoes because they don't have the common sense to tie their own shoes, right? They have no real life application, and so I didn't want to go to college. I had an interest in working with my hands. I enjoyed, as a matter of fact, before I was training to be a plumber, I was training to be a mechanic. And it's probably a wonderful thing that didn't work out, because I was working at a dealership, and that may have locked me into a situation where I don't know. It didn't work out. But my point is, I was a plumber during the day,
yeah.
but I always had a side hustle. I was always trying to better my position. Cedar and I have had multiple online businesses. We were always improving real estate and flipping homes. We, you know, I was never satisfied, and it wasn't just a finance thing. I worked my way into management very young. By the time I was 26, I had worked my way into a position that very very few other people at my age, and I don't even know if I was really qualified to do it, but I
Aren't
did
we
it.
all? Aren't
And I
we
did it
all?
long enough. Yeah,
It's
and I did it long
initiative.
enough to realize.
Being a leader, it's not about, nobody can say that they're a boss. A boss is the best team player. That when you're sitting at a table, you're not at the head of the table, you're in the middle, so then you make everybody feel like you're a part of the team. That a leader, it's not an overt thing. It's more like an indirect, that you just are a leader or not. That it's not a matter of going to school. It's not a matter. Partially, I would say it's a matter of family. It would be a part of my oma personally. My dad, he worked for the gas and electric company. Designed the plans in the case of a natural disaster, how to turn off all the natural gas. They didn't appreciate his work. Then he moved on to business management consulting, 600 businesses. And he was doing little, I don't know if you've ever heard of like Reach magazine or Entertainment magazine, where like different, it was called the American Savings Club, where rather than having to be quasi embarrassed by shelling out coupons, all of the companies would just opt into a debit card sort of card, where you could just present it at a restaurant and then immediately get, however much percentage off. But, long story short, back then the printer, didn't end up following through. And then back then with printers, if you didn't have a printer, You weren't printing anything, right? And then he moved on to property insurance and life insurance. But after 2008 hit, he's the type of guy where he wasn't gonna sell somebody on $1 million policy if they can't feed themselves, right? So then he moved, into Best Buy, and now he's back into insurance. But I don't really, and he has a background in sound as well. But specifically, my Oma, that she was a seamstress, didn't speak English, and she would even turn down raises, that her boss would call her into the office and she just wouldn't even go because she didn't want to for them to find out that she didn't speak English, right? So instead of raises, they gave her stock options. So I don't know if you've ever heard of
Wow.
McAlpins or Dillard's. Have you heard of Dillard's?
Sure.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So we owned McAlpins that turned into Dillard's. So and then obviously after 2008, guess where all of our money was in retail,
Sure.
which was a terrible idea. So we lost 2/3. And my grandpa had the machine shop. He came from a Hungarian village, no electric, and his goal was to bring electric back to his village. And so when he got into Munich, they said, "You suck as an electrical engineer. You should be a mechanical engineer." So the war was going on, and he came back to came to the United States and built a machine shop here and did like assembly lines for Hong Kong, Africa, and would invent an assembly line and then would go over there and kind of supervise them building it. And he passed away when I was 1 years old, right? But
Oh,
he
wow.
put enough work into this property that I'm now in, with the house and everything, being on the same property where, it put my parents in a better position. And it really sparked my entrepreneurship. It allowed me to take that risk. And like you were talking about earlier, that the more risk, the more reward. It's literally that easy. People asking advice, oh, well, should I do this? Should I not do that? Calculated risk, that, for example, with me, with the entertainment business, 9 out of 10 times, I know who I'm talking to or who I'm working with may not pan out, but I'm still going to learn something out of those failures. And that is what is life. That you've got to trip over your laces, before you realize that, you got to learn how to tie your shoes. And if you don't trip over your laces a few times, that when I was going to, because I've been like this since I was 15 years old. I had a mobile auto detailing business, trying to raise money for a car. And uh, all my friends, in high school, they just had no real ambition. And I used to give them all kinds of crap, but I realized one day that you cannot tell somebody to grow up. They have to go through their own experiences themselves. And if someone's unwilling to do that, then, that's on them. That I think having people around you, back to, the tangent that I was getting on, is so important. And if you have 5 millionaires around you, the good likelihood that you're going to be a millionaire yourself. And I've been lucky to talk to people like you, and to look at you like a role model the past, few months or almost a year now. And I think that that is what YouTube really enables, is children that don't have great fathers or don't have great mothers that can look at, someone like you and envision their own life, being better, or that it even is possible. But, hearing those behind the scenes now of, you know, the whole process, you didn't just wake up with 300,000 followers. You had to, put in that groundwork to even make that a possibility for you to take that risk. And that since you did it honestly, that you were doing it for your kids, or you're doing it, to show your family out of state. That type of authenticity is what's important. That you can't, cash out your savings, start a YouTube channel, and then be fake. You've got to have a dog, to build an emotional connection with your audience. And if you're not willing to prostitute out a dog, you're not going to have 300,000 followers. You got
Yeah,
to
man,
get
are
puppies. We
you?
got to get dandelions. I mean, you've really got to work them. That, you know, being in media, you got to pull on people's heartstrings.
Yeah, but you got to be genuine. You got to
Genuine.
be real.
Exactly.
I'm telling
Exactly.
you,
Take
I
risks,
have
but be
sat.
genuine. Yeah.
Well, people smell it a mile away.
Yeah.
Reality TV has ruined people. Well, it has honed people's skills to smell BS a mile away.
Yeah.
The question is whether or not you're going to consume that BS. I think this is why YouTube is so popular, is because people are so burned out
Yeah.
on the fake, right?
Yeah.
We live in a world where nothing we're not sure what's truth. We're not sure what's consistent. But let me YouTube was never the goal. Success on YouTube, to be a YouTuber, and I get emails from people that ask questions around YouTube, and I tell them I'm probably not the guy to ask, because my ambitions were never to be a YouTube star, whatever that means. We had a nest egg. We had a certain amount of money saved when we started this thing, and we burned through that pretty quick. But I always worked to make sure we had, there's something about,
The everyday stuff,
this
like you said,
universal
that
law.
the long-term goals aren't going to happen if you don't have those daily tasks taken care of. Yeah.
If you don't work, yeah. I there were times when I wasn't sure how we would get something accomplished. There were times when I wasn't sure where I was going to come up with certain money to get certain materials. But I got up every day, even when I was sick as I've ever been. I got up and I came up here and I went to work, and I worked an 8 or a 10 or a 12-hour day or a 16-hour day. And in the back of my head, I refused to accept the idea that I couldn't figure this out. And I'm telling you, there is a universal law. You can call it God, you can call it religion, you can call it, I don't care what you call it. But there is this thing that goes hand in hand with hard work, and that's success. And the person that sits back and thinks they're going to accomplish, they could have the most beautiful vision board. They could have the most beautiful long-term goals. They could have the most beautiful, they could be the best speaker that can convey, the last 10 years I've listened to some of the highest paid motivational speakers in the world. Some of these people are getting over $100,000 for 45 minutes. I've listened to dozens of them, right?
Who are they?
Not one of these guys. I don't even know. I don't even want to say names.
Sure.
But
Zig
but
Ziglar or
the biggest, yeah, I actually like Zig, but well, he's
shout
no
out
longer here.
Zig. I
But
had to throw him out there. He gets
yeah,
me too pumped up
his principles.
sometimes. Like Zig Ziglar and Gary Vee, I almost feel like I'm hearing myself in my own head, and it starts like making me short circuit. Like it's kind of weird that
Yeah, I don't drink the Gary Vee Kool-Aid, but I don't drink
yeah,
the
I
Kool-Aid
don't really
from.
listen to him either, but when I have, it just kind of is just it's like
Yeah,
Ziglar
who did that?
on I'm trying to think of something
Jack?
appropriate. On something. Zig Ziglar on something.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
My point is, none of these people moved me to action the way that I listened to a woman speak one time, and it wasn't designed to be a motivational speak. But this I would guess this lady is probably a few years younger than me, so we'll say she's in her late 30s, early 40s. She was a single mom. She had nothing. She was living in government housing, and her daughter's father had never been in her life. She'd never received any money to help this little girl, and she was broke. And one day, her mom called her up, and she said, "Hey, we so and so, a friend of ours, wants to share a business opportunity with us." And this friend took them to lunch and proceeded to tell them about this great, home-based business. And the product. He kept talking about the product, and this girl sat there the whole time and listened to this guy talk. And the guy could tell she wasn't interested. And finally, at the end of the conversation, the guy asked her if she wanted to try the product, and she told him point blank. She said, "Look, I don't have two nickels to rub together. She says, I don't want to try your product. I need a way to make money. And he sat back and he realized that he had been approaching this all wrong. He was talking about how great the product was when he should have been talking about the business model. And he shared the business model with her, and she went home. And a week later, she called this guy back and she said, I've sold my TV, I've sold the Xbox, I've sold everything I have, and I've managed to raise about 2/3 of the money that I need to join your business. And this guy was blown away that this single mother would take that kind of a risk. And he called another friend of his and he said, look, he said, we need to help this lady raise the last few $100s that she needs to get into this business. And they basically gave her stuff to have a yard sale. And it took her another month. And she, over the next month, she raised the final few $100s that she needed to join that business. And 1 year later, she was making $12,000 a month. She was making 6 figures. Okay, so I listened to her tell that story, and that was like 8 years ago I heard that story. And that moved me to action more than any of these motivational speakers. Because the truth is, these motivational speakers get on stage and they try to talk in a way that's going to cause you to get up and do something. The problem is, these motivational speakers, I want to know what they've done. What have you done in your life to cause me to want to be like you, right? And so that's why I even guys like Tony Robbins, I don't relate to them. I have nothing in common with these guys. I want to talk to the common man, the blue collar guy that's managed to work his butt off in a way that I can relate to.
Yeah.
Okay. There's an old man down the street he's probably 4 miles away from me. I drive by his house a couple times a week. He just turned 86, literally 2 days ago. He started out, his dad died when he was 5 years old. Okay. So he started out in a little small town in eastern Idaho with no father. And he talked about how the sheriff in that town where he grew up became a father figure for him. One day he took his mom's car when he was like 12 years old and he drove into town, and the sheriff saw him and knew that he wasn't supposed to be driving that car, pulled him out of the car and spanked his ass right there on the side of the road. Okay. That sheriff became the father figure that he needed, right? That in early 20s, mid 20s, this man quits school, quits college. Actually, I take it back. He may have finished college, and he goes to work on a feedlot. And he figures out that this feedlot, the way they're feeding cattle, he figures out that there are better ways to do it. And the owner of that feedlot tells him, if you can just get this business to make money, I'll sell it to you in 3 years. He said, and this is like in the 1940s,
Yeah.
this is probably in the 50s by now. He tells this kid, his name's Chuck. He says, Chuck, if you can figure out how to put $40,000 in the bank over the next 2 years from this business, if we can get this feedlot to make $40,000 over the next 2 years, I'll sell it to you. 2 years later, I think he had over $100,000 in the business account. So when Chuck approached him to buy it, the guy said, what are you crazy? You think I'm going to sell this thing to you? This is the best cash cow I have right now. And so the guy refused to sell it to Chuck, so Chuck quit. And then Chuck decides, I'm going to figure out how to raise the money to start my own feedlot. So he writes up a proposal to borrow money from the local bank. And he does his damnedest. He works his butt off trying to help this bank see this loan. It takes him 3 months. Okay. And he's trying to borrow, I think something like, it wasn't much, $35,000 or $40,000. But again, that's in the 1950s. He submits this proposal. Time goes by. He gets a phone call that the bank president wants to come and meet him and look over his operation, look over this. And he'd already purchased the land. I don't know all the details. It was already making a little bit of money. This grumpy old bank president flies in, and Chuck picks him up at the airport. And Chuck's a very religious guy. And this bank president gets in his truck, and I think Chuck drove him around, showed him his operation, and shortly after the guy gets there, the bank president says, "Take me back to the airport." And he's smoking a cigar, a little stub of a cigar the whole time. And he just proceeds to tell this guy, Chuck, he's never going to get anywhere in life. He says, "You don't know what you're doing. Your spreadsheets are horrible. You have no idea." He said, "If we loaned you this money, it would be gone in minutes. You're never going to get anywhere." Okay, so Chuck dropped him off at the airport. A week or two goes by. Chuck's depressed. He's upset over the whole thing. He tells his wife, "I don't know what we're going to do, but somehow we're going to figure this out." A week or two goes by, and a letter shows up in their mailbox from the bank. And he brings the mail in. He doesn't even open it. His wife sees it. And somewhere in the middle of that, they get a phone call at the house there. And it's the bank, it's the secretary to this he wasn't even going to call the guy back. He wasn't even going to open that piece of mail. His wife opened the piece of mail, and it says, "You've been approved." And it wasn't just the $35,000. It was basically whatever he needed.
Yeah.
But it said call the bank president as soon as you see this. He reluctantly calls the president of the bank, and the guy just tells him again. He goes, "I don't think you're going to make it." He goes, "I don't think you're going to make it." He said, "I was certain that day that I was going to decline your loan." He said, "But I've never seen somebody that had so much freaking passion and ambition for what they were doing."
It makes me emotional too, man. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm getting
Chuck,
goosebumps right now too, man. I'm right with you.
My buddy Chuck, my friend Chuck is probably worth, I don't even know. He's probably worth $30 million right now. I don't even know. I shouldn't even say that. He's worth million. He owns, let me just put it this way. He owns the banks.
Let's
I'm
have
not
him on
kidding
the
when I say that.
podcast. We need
He
to do like
owns
a
the
three-way or something sometime.
Yeah. So my point is, he's the guy I talk to, right?
Yeah.
He's the guy.
Perseverance.
It's snowing like crazy.
Yeah, there is no risk
Well,
and reward without perseverance. Like, there is no, like, it should be risk, perseverance, reward, not risk and reward. You know, that there is no reward without persistence.
I've never gotten anywhere in my life. I've never gotten anywhere in my life by doing what everybody else did. I just haven't. I've never gotten anywhere. You know, one of my favorite quotes is "Observe the masses and do the opposite." You know, I wouldn't say the risks I have taken are, you know, the word entrepreneur. I don't like that word, because when somebody tells me I'm an entrepreneur, I literally think to my head, okay, well, they've been broke multiple times in their life. Okay, so I've never been broke. And maybe had I been broke, I would have had even more ambition and more passion for business. But we've always done well. As a plumber, I've always done well. I've always done well enough. Cedar has always stayed home with our kids.
And everybody should listen to that. You know, if you do the very best of plumbing, or, you know, you can provide for a family, you know, and be able to build this sort of life for yourself. You know, so people need to hear this. I just wanted to throw that out there, you know, to start there.
Yeah, I don't I don't pretend to be an expert in anything other than hard work, and I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
Is we've taken risks. You know, moving from Arizona to southeastern Idaho with no, I didn't have a job lined up when I got here. We barely had a rental house lined up. You know, I tried to make sure, you know, more than anything, the older I get, the more I realize my kids are the ones that pay the ultimate price for the moving around for these things that I do.
Yeah.
And so I have a little bit of hesitancy with that, right? My older three kids, I've got my three older kids, my two younger kids. My older three kids, my oldest daughter, Sage, she's almost 22. She probably paid the price more than, you know, Cedar and I have moved like 17 times.
Yeah.
And she probably paid the price more than anybody, my older three kids did.
And then
But
they will start helping you now, you know, so then that's probably why you're thinking about that second property. You're like, oh man, I'll just put rent to work on the second house.
Yeah, he's probably the one that'll end up taking this up
Yeah.
here. You know, Cheyenne, my 18-year-old, she loves it up here as well. But Rhett has probably worked more alongside with me, and
Does he
he
have
will
access to
continue to.
his three wheeler yet?
It's covered in snow right now, but I just got the tire. He blew the tire out on it.
Well, I'm talking about his
He's been riding
grades.
it.
I'm talking about
Let
his
me
grades
answer
because
that.
as far as the
Yeah, no,
content is concerned, he said he wasn't going to be riding it until his grades are up. So is he riding it or what?
officially, he's
Is this
riding
a
it, but
Red Pocket Ranch
officially,
exposed video?
it's still, he's that close.
Okay.
But I let him get a taste of it, and then
Ah,
he got a flat
man.
on one of the tires. Yeah, so I gave
And
in a
three
little
wheelers
bit,
aren't
but
very
he's
safe.
right
Why
there.
are you getting him a three wheeler? Three wheelers are like the most unsafe, like, that's like a murder device, basically. You know,
Yeah. If you
especially
can
with
ride
like
a
a
three
hill
wheeler, you
like
can
you
ride
have.
anything.
I don't want to jinx anything, but I don't know. I mean, probably a dirt. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just scares me.
You're
I
going to
mean,
get hurt
even
on
on heavy
anything.
machinery, it's just
Yeah.
but it's at risk,
You know what happens when you ride a three-wheeler? Your common sense, your common, all of these things,
Yeah,
dirt
and it
bikes,
was your
three-wheelers, four-wheelers.
childhood too.
You're gonna,
Like you said that you want to relive your childhood in part too. You know, uh,
yeah, I don't want my kids to get hurt. I don't.
yeah.
He's already had probably 3 years ago. He was trying to pop wheelies on his dirt bike with one of the kids in the neighborhood. He comes over and he lays his knee open, has to get like a half dozen stitches. He's already had stitches. Look, I've had 20 plus concussions.
Oh
Okay,
wow.
I don't want my kids. Red broke his leg last year
Well, I'm not
playing
talking about your
around on
kids.
a.
I was talking about more from a macro perspective, right? That I've always heard that three wheelers are very unsafe. I don't
Well,
know. That's just when I saw that I was like, oh no, like, because my neighbor's got a
well,
couple of them. You know,
there's one particular three wheeler that the government sued Honda over, and that's
That's
the
what I thought. I
185.
thought they're not even. I thought like I was like they don't even like but I think I've had dirt bikes. My dad's got 1977 DT 250 Enduro and then a IT 175, with big knobby tires. And, I was across the street, there's a school and there's a long black driveway, right? I'm putting on my jeans, I'm putting on my jacket, I'm putting on dirt bike gloves, I'm putting on a helmet and so I get going pretty good, and I'm used to my 90 cc, right? So typically, when I wanted to brake, I could just touch the front brakes. But with the bigger bikes and the bigger knobbier tires on blacktop, a deer came out about 30 foot in front of me. I was like, all right, no big deal, no big deal. I'll just start tapping the brakes. And then the wheel just locks up to the left, and then I'm just like sliding about 20 feet. But what's my first reaction, right? It's my dad's bike. So I'm sitting there bleeding down the side
Sure.
of my body, trying to kickstart the bike, like, oh shit, like, his bike's not starting. But and luckily my neighbor was a pediatrician or a nurse, so she, helped me out a little bit. But yeah, that's my only big uh accident. And I was wearing like two pairs of jeans. Like I was like pretty prepared, but
You
that my best friend just died on his motorcycle last month, from primary school. I hadn't
know,
really, hung out with him much lately, but you know, that's scary to me. I'd love to get a motorcycle. My dad's got a 750, that I could restore. But I don't know that like you were talking about the concussions. Look at Pee Wee football. That you inspect a child's brain, you're gonna get CTE. I can't even watch football anymore. Because that's co-signing, brain damage. That it's basically endorsing it. That there's so many things that but you know what? If you don't get dirt in between your fingernails or if you don't get a couple scars, how are you gonna differentiate yourself from everybody else? And I think you're giving him that
we
experience versus a lot of other kids that don't even have an opportunity to get a three wheeler. Whether or not they would want one or not. So he's very lucky.
I don't want my kids. I don't want my kids to get hurt any more than they
Sure.
have to. Like, any reasonable father is gonna should recognize, you know should be involved in their kids' lives
Yeah.
enough to recognize the paths that they're going down, right? You know, if I my kids, my boys especially, if I decide that I'm never ever going to put them in a scenario where they're going to get hurt, the problem is the moment I'm not around, they're going to get hurt. And so my philosophy is I'm going to give them as much rope as they can handle. Okay. If the one thing we don't mess around with around here is head bumps. Okay. My kids wear, Rhett has to wear his helmet. At least he's supposed to wear his helmet when he's riding the three wheeler. He doesn't always do it.
Yeah.
Um, but my kids, I started having concussions when I was a little tiny kid. You know, like 2, 3, 4 years old. And the last concussion I had, I was probably 21 or 22. And none of them happened on dirt bikes. None of them happened on three wheelers.
I got
It
hit by a
happened
steep
fighting
limb
my
last week.
brothers.
I
Yeah.
got hit by
And
a steep
so,
limb last week.
yeah, there's always, I still, dude, if the rest of my hair ever falls out, you'll see all these scars I got across the top of my head.
Well, it
But,
kind of like woke me up a little bit. It made me realize, like, crap, like I should have my own event. I should stop, you know, because I'm working with all these different entertainment entities, and maybe I should give you a little bit of my background too. That do you have any questions for me?
we've talked about it. You know, you obviously have an interesting path that you're on as well, and I'm proud of you for getting where you've gotten as well.
Yeah.
You've also taken a road that's a little bit unorthodox, and you know I commend anybody. I commend anybody that's willing to take risks that are, you know, it's easy to do what Dad did. It's easy to go to college, become a school teacher, do whatever, and follow in Mom and Dad's footsteps, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a safe place to be. But to me, I never felt fulfilled. I never felt, you know, I just never, that thing inside of me, that exhilaration, whatever that is, I never felt it until I put myself in a situation where I could see what I was made of, where I could see what kind of metal I had, where I could see what kind of a person, what kind of strength, what kind of ambition. And this lifestyle that we live is not for the faint of heart. There's no question. And my wife, I couldn't imagine doing what we do without she is by far, she's not only the glue that keeps our family together, because when I am working, when I was doing all of these things up here, she was running the business in town. She was handling the kids in town. She was giving me she wasn't complaining. She wasn't a
Well, and
boat
that's what I'm
anchor.
saying.
You
Like
know,
she's like very chill, you know, and like, and is that behind the scenes too? Just very chill, laid back, you know, like supportive. Like she really seems, and obviously I'm a big fan of Justin Rhodes too, and his wife's pretty supportive too. But you know, I mean, your wife's, you know, pretty supportive. You know that's important because none of this could be possible. You know, it's one thing to take risk and then persevere, but if you have a wife or if you have kids that aren't on board, there's no level of perseverance. And I'm not married, so I have no perspective. But you know, I'm sure you'd be able to, you know, allude to the fact that, you know, that's your luckiest asset right there. You know that none of this would be
yeah,
possible if you didn't have someone like Cedar to put you in that, to even give you the option of having that life. You know that that's a very lucky part of this. You know.
I'm sure. I'm sure if I went through the proper scans and the proper whatever diagnosis, they would say you have all kinds of CTE.
Yeah.
And I have a tendency to be a little bit when I was younger, especially all over the place. And I when we were first married, she was pregnant with our oldest daughter, and there was a guy, a horse trainer that was really popular at that time. His name was Monty Roberts. He was doing these seminars, and he happened to come through Arizona. I paid the money to go sit and listen to him. How it was like a half a day seminar, and his philosophy around horsemanship was mind blowing to me, because he was all about kind of the gentle approach and not breaking the horse. And I was very into horses. We had horses at that time, and I was so moved by what he did. He still does on a ranch in Northern California. I came home from that seminar, and I wrote a letter. I wish to this day, I wish I had it, but I hand wrote this 2 or 3 page letter to this guy, Monty Roberts, begging him to let me move my wife and my unborn child to Northern California to learn to be a horse trainer the way that he did. I would live on his, I had this all planned out. I was going to live on his ranch. He wasn't going to pay me anything. We were going to live on love and whatever else. And I was going to learn this thing that struck a chord inside of me. And my wife read that letter and she looked at me and she's like, who are you? You know, I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant with your child here. And somewhere in the middle of that, I called my dad. And I called him up and I told him what I wanted to do. My dad was also a horseman, but he was a practical horseman. He used to calf rope when he was a kid, but as he got older, he realized that horses have a tendency to be an expense.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was smart enough. My dad was never overbearing with his fatherly advice. And so I called him up and I said, Dad, I want to learn to be a horse trainer. I want to move to Northern California. I'm going to take Cedar and we're going to load up the truck and we're going to go. And my dad said, you know what? You decided to get married and be a father. He said, you probably need to slow down. He says, I don't know if that's in your future. And he made it very clear to me that I had made decisions that I needed to stand behind. I needed to be a husband and a father. Doesn't mean I can't pursue some of these things. Doesn't mean I can't still have a passion about horsemanship or whatever else. And he was always that sounding board for me. Cedar, half the time I would call my dad first before I got Cedar's blood pressure up, right? And most of the time my dad would just help me see what was right in front of me. Okay, but I'm telling you, I dated my share of girls back in the day. Cedar was the only person I dated that my, whatever that subconscious thing in my brain, whatever that reptilian, whatever you want to call it, something inside me said, whatever she has, you need it. And what she has is number one, a high tolerance. Obviously, she's married to me, a high tolerance for all the dumb things I do. But she has everything that I don't, right? She's a perfect balance to my crazy. She keeps me, she doesn't like being on camera as much as I try to put her on camera. And I always give her crap because when the camera comes on, she, how do I say this? I think she's a pleaser. I'm the person that's always trying to make push everybody out of the way to get to where I'm going. She's the person that's taking time to get to know everybody along the way. Every once in a while, the real Cedar comes out on camera, and it's awesome. Like the time that she chewed me out for cutting down too many trees is one of those times. Because most of the time she's just so laid back and she's just come to grips with who I am.
And what's
I'm a
her
hot mess.
passions? Because what I would maybe suggest is rather than her being on your channel and possibly being uncomfortable in a sense, have her build her own channel and then, slowly, not saying that she can do whatever she wants, of course, but I mean, what sort of passions does she have? Whether or not it's architecture or design, I mean, why you guys design this or that, like more of the osmosis part of the designing making process, or I mean, what is she interested in? What is some of the other than family, of course,
Yeah, we've talked about this, and I think that when she wants to do it, I don't ever want to push
Well, and all in her own,
her or
right?
my
Like
kid.
nothing, it wouldn't be anything like cross promo, nothing like that. Like just something that would be raw, that if she wanted to, because I think there's a lot of pressure and a lot of tension and a lot of because you're a natural, right? But that naturality came from 3 or 4 years of producing content, original content. And that the
Sure.
only way she's going to
Right.
feel comfortable is by maybe putting all of her videos on unlisted or private and then just slowly
Yeah.
kind of getting her confidence up. But I don't know. I'm just a producer, right? I'm just thinking of, different ways of how to produce it. But That what are her
Well,
interests? Would you say?
let me say, for
Yeah.
her, I think that reptilian brain inside me recognized that she had ambitions to be a mother. She wasn't, she was training to be a loan officer when we were first married, and she probably would have made more money than I did as a plumber. But she got pregnant, and we decided, when she had that baby, we made a conscious decision that we would put our family first. And if that meant our lifestyle had to be compromised, not the right word. If our lifestyle had to be less
Yeah. Sacrifice.
until we grew, yeah, so she could be home and don't get me wrong, she ran our plumbing company from
Yeah.
home. She's helped with every business I've ever had. She's always done her part from home. But she has no ambitions greater than being a mother, and she's very, very
Respect,
good
man.
at it.
Respect. That's
And
all you can
so,
ask for.
look, we live in a world now where men don't know where they stand,
Yeah. I try to. You were
and women.
talking about dating a bunch of girls. I can't take a girl out to Mexican to save my life. All they want to do is hang out, in the studio or do this or do that, and that it's just like I want to take you out to dinner. I want to develop a relationship, and I think there's too many options nowadays. That if you lived in a city with 1,000 people, those are your 1,000 people. And you gotta. Not saying you had to make it work, but that whole you had to make it work. You know, is the whole world. And now with there being too many options, like you were talking about, how you just kind of mow through things, whereas Cedar's more developing relationships. Where I'm similar to her where, I try to treat everybody how I want to be treated. And 9 out of 10 times that does not pan out well. Whether or not it's,
Sure.
relationships or, friendships, that the whole reciprocating and the whole it's not like there's a law for reciprocating. There's not a law for being considerate, right? Like that we've got all these laws that we don't need, but there's no law about like being considerate, right? Like an amendment to the Constitution of hey, like I don't know, I digress, but this is the podcast. This is just me kind of spitballing here, but um this was great.
Well, look,
um
some of us need people, and look, I try to pretend that I don't need people,
yeah.
and the few people that I let into my inner circle, I keep those people close.
Sure.
But the truth is, back to the very beginning where we started.
Yeah.
Maybe we can wrap it up here.
Yeah.
In the very beginning where we started, I was talking about this guy Dick Prenicky being out in the world, in Alaska by himself, and how he could only go about 3 months before he had to have interaction. So now we live in a world where, because of COVID, we're not allowed to interact. We don't touch. We don't shake hands. We don't hug. We don't we don't do all of these things that the human body craves, whether we recognize it or not. The human body needs touch. It needs love, genuine love, not something through FaceTime, not something through Zoom, right? It needs interaction with people that love us and people we love. Now we live in a world where half the people we see have a mask on, okay? And the other half that don't want to wear masks are getting the stink eye from those that are wearing the mask, right? And there's this tension. There's this crazy tension right now. I walked into to Lowe's,
Yeah.
having a great day on Monday with my wife and the dog, and some old man wanted to pick a fight with me because I wasn't wearing a mask. And real quick, I get about 4 inches from his face, and I tell him, "You're lucky you're an old man," because the stuff he was saying to me,
Yeah.
he just wouldn't stop. And after I left there, I felt horrible for confronting him that way. But he has somehow decided that he can talk to me a certain way. And in that moment, I reacted in a way that I wasn't proud of. But the truth is, we need each other. We need interaction. As much as I love being up here in my little piece of the woods, I need relationships. I need my wife. I need my kids. My brothers, my family, my little brother, we talk almost every day. Um, Relationships are important. I guess I would just conclude by challenging people
Yeah.
to take a path less traveled and
I'm gonna show
work
you
really hard.
something too, real quick. Something that I keep on suggesting to people that this is another route to go, so then you can breathe a lot better. That I would suggest getting a
Sure,
face shield, and if it's good enough for, I watched on Vice News that they had some women of the night that were using face shields, and I was like, well, hell, if it's good enough for them, it's good for me, So at least I can breathe better, and I can, because I used to have glasses and stuff, but so that's what I may
I
suggest.
bet I have more in the last 6 months. Mask, and it's not that I'm not wearing a mask.
Yeah, I'm just
I just
joking.
didn't
I'm
have a
just
mask on.
joking.
I was
I'm just joking.
oh,
That that
but I
that solutions. Like if I had in my perfect world, I have an exoskeleton with AC on all the time. Like that would be great. That it's like
yeah,
exoskeleton, perfect air, designed by Tesla, like where like my joints, like you've seen like, Japan and China with, different exoskeletons that, Elon Musk said if you can't beat them, join them, with Neuralink
sure.
and uh, all kinds of different things. And to talk, a little bit more about that property too, because I have some questions for you too. That, approaching a hill, right? What is the first thing that I need to do when approaching a hill? Like the first thing that I did was look for flat land, wherever I could find flat land. Um, I'm looking at water, maybe I need to go up there when it's raining or something to kind of like investigate like where's this happening um that it's going to be a challenge, but I think, $50,000 for 8 acres is not bad. That my uncle, coming from a family property standpoint, but it is up the side of a hill, but if I'm able to build up there, the value is going to be a lot higher, and I think it also is going to give me a place to retreat. That at this studio we have a home, and my parents, and everything's cool, my parents are together, everything has been fine, but at the end of the day my dad looks more of this like a social club, whereas I look at it more as a business. So his friends will come in here, and not clean up or do different things like that, and you know as everybody does, you got to get your own property, and if I'm going to start making money, I'm looking at more property, and looking at someone like you where you were able to get a pretty great value on land that was on a hill. That's kind of like a secret of real estate in a sense where it's hard, but if you can build a place up high, it's kind of the whole Hollywood Hills effect, right? Where everybody really wants to have the greatest views, but that just doesn't happen overnight, you know?
Yeah, it's
So
typically
recommendations, I
to
would
build on a
say,
hillside.
like, what sort of recommendations do you have for me approaching this building? That looking at what was the first thing that you did when you approached a giant hill? Just cutting the honeysuckles, like
I asked myself how bad I wanted it because I just knew, like the entire every time
I'm talking
every
about
the
from like a
first year
technical standpoint, right? Like from a construction standpoint, like what would be the first thing that I
I
would
wasn't
look at?
thinking that far down the road.
What?
What I would tell you, I wasn't thinking that far down the road. What I would tell you is the first thing you have to ask yourself. You said this was a piece of family property.
Yeah, 8
Your
acres.
grandparents
He
used to own
has
it,
a
or
house on the property that's an octagon that he designed that I'll show you. And he has never been up in the woods. He's a power and electric guy, made good money. He had 48 acres, and he just recently sold 8 of it for 50,000. I was like, well, crap, like that doesn't sound bad. uh, kind of like a
so
Batman
again,
type of thing.
so again, to me, it's all about. It starts with how bad you
Yeah,
want it,
I
right?
would say a
So that's
campsite. Yeah,
the family connection. The family connection's huge. Okay, I would love if this little piece of property I had some connection to my dad's, to our family ranch, which is 40 miles away from here, but it doesn't. Okay. But this was my only option. So step one is how bad. The question I constantly ask myself is,
But
can
that's
I
easy.
make this
I mean,
work?
I wanted 150%. I mean, that's not even a question for me. But,
Okay.
you know, so I already won it,
Okay.
you know. Yeah.
So typically hillside construction is always going to cost way more than normal construction. And it all comes down to the dirt work, to excavation. So if you, I would look at it and I would figure out where you're going to put the road in, where you're going to put the road in to get the house. I'll tell you right now that we've lived in our house for over a year, I wish our house was further back into the woods. We're probably a few hundred feet off the road.
Yeah.
But
especially with
I
you being
would love
off
it if
grid, especially with you being off grid too. You know, you could really be wherever you
it
wanted,
would.
and I know you got great water pressure where you're at.
Yeah. That's where you start. You figure out what the best spot to put a house. You can always excavate into the hillside, the concrete work. The other thing I try to do, the other thing I did myself was I looked at other properties that were hillside homes. I
That's
knew
why I'm
I knew
talking to
somebody that
you.
had built a home. Yeah, so I went and looked at a house that was built into the hillside, and you
That's a good
again, you
idea,
work
because
hard
I
enough.
was almost thinking, like, you know, Elon Musk boring company, right? Like, he's boring underneath Los Angeles, right? That he has bricks for a
Yeah.
dollar, right? That, have you seen that where he's selling bricks for a dollar? It cost a bunch to get them, but if I could create like some sort of Batman cave, right, where I just go into the side of the mountain and then have a studio inside of the mountain, it'd be great for sound proofing, you know. And I don't need that big of a
Next
place. I
year,
have a house here, you know. And something else to throw out there too, I'm an only child, right? So at the end of the day, you know, I'm pretty healthy. That my grandpa, like you said, a family connection, that my grandpa owned, you know, a few acres on this same plot of land, but after he passed away, they had gotten rid of it. So in a sense, you know, as that video that I sent you is, I'm kind of finishing what my grandpa started, right? Where the shop is his working place. Like, sure, if he has to crash here, great. There's a house, you know, it's a nice house, don't get me wrong. But, and then he had the other property up on that hill, you know, coming down to it, and that he just never got around to it, right? And if I'm able to, you know, go and try to revamp it, and one of the things that's kind of bittersweet is a part of my uncle's property is we could never get cell reception. You know, Christmas, you know, Thanksgiving, you know, whenever we'd be over there, we couldn't get cell reception. So I was excited. I was like, great, you know, like, I'm coming out there, I'm gonna go hiking, like, I'm not gonna get cell signal, I'm not gonna get any calls. This is gonna be a great property. Yeah, the internet was slow, but it was there. And then I got on his Wi-Fi, and my internet here is like maybe 2 to 10 up, maybe 300 down, which is decent. You know, my dad doesn't know anything about producing, so, you know, we got 300 download, but we've only got 2 or 3 up. You know, thank God. But I get to my uncle's house, I get on his Wi-Fi, 100, and he's in the middle of nowhere. I don't know how he's done it, but he has 130 up. Where did that even come from? I'm just going to run 1,000 feet Ethernet to the top of the mountain. And the ideas that I had was just have like a basic campsite up there, right? And then I was even thinking like to do some sort of like wire pulley system with like a chairlift with like a winch or something. Because if I'm going to like be hauling a bunch of stuff up there like wood, I'm not, I mean, that's going to kill me. You know, that I don't know. I mean, does a zip line pulley system with a chairlift make any sense to you? Is that, or is that just ridiculous to get supplies up to the top?
no, no. Look. You do what you got to do to get things going. I mean, you just need to spend enough time up there figuring out where you want to do this and figuring out if the juice is worth the squeeze, right? If the effort that you're going
Well,
to
I
have to
think
put
it's just
into
fun.
it.
Like I said, I like failing. This is going to be a giant failure. That, but I'm setting myself up to just experience it anyways, right? that by no means am I gonna have a house up there right now. This is like a 2 to 10 year plan. That right now, I just want to
Sure.
camp up there maybe before the end of the season, maybe do some hunting, like because I've never done much hunting, right? That I was a Cub Scout, but my dad, we don't have well, I don't want to talk too much about guns, but he's not the biggest fan of guns, so he really hasn't let me go
Sure.
hunting or anything like that. So go out, camp, make a comfortable camping site. Similarly to what I've been suggesting, and I know you've been busy with 1,000 different things, but a a mountaintop lookout, like a fire lookout type of thing, where that is where I would have put the cabin. Is like on the top of the mountain, like a fire lookout type of structure where, you know, that's what I want to build. The similar idea that I kind of threw out to you, like a top of the mountain fire lookout where, it's like your cabin similarly. That I took some inspiration from that. That I don't
Yeah,
see
my little
myself
drive my
living
side
there.
by
I
side.
see it as a place to kind of unwind.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That's how my little cabin is up on top. I'm
Yeah.
going to try and drive my side by side up here today, but I don't think it's going to go well.
What about your
You know what,
truck? I
man?
thought you were gonna get your truck up there next, right?
No, I think I missed that window. There's probably 4 inches of snow on the ground outside.
Well, what about a winch
But
system? Like I said, what
um,
about like a piece of wire that's like 5 or 10 gauge wire or something less, and then just find the tallest tree that you can find, run it. Or what are you taking up there again? That you brought insulation?
I know.
Are you doing like what are you still doing up there?
Yeah, I need to get. I can get a little snow machine. I'm trying to buy a new snow machine right now, and me and Rhett. So I can get what I need up there with a snowmobile or something like that. But my point is,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with the pooling system. Here's my advice on whatever you do, and
Is it steep? I
you
think
know,
it's a little bit steeper than
I guess
yours.
take it.
That's what I'm afraid of. Is that it's crazy steep. That's what I'm afraid of. That like it's so steep that I don't even know if it's possible, right? But like you said, I gotta
Everything.
want it.
My where I go to my little cabin,
Mm,
the first hill is so steep that yeah, it's not reasonable to really what I did up there. But when I finally get up to where the cabin is, it's not as bad. But
yep.
what I would tell you is whatever you do, there's this idea that failure. How do I say this without coming across? Failure is good, right?
Yep.
Wisdom is the direct result of failure. Okay, but don't start this thing out giving yourself an excuse to fail. Okay, because the problem is you'll get to be my age or older, and you'll look back on your life and you'll have a whole lot of failures piled up and nothing that you succeeded in. And the problem is we need to have wins. It's important for our brain, for literally the wiring in our brain needs to have success.
Completion.
The whatever you do, I don't care if you build a little yurt up there. I don't care if you build a little campsite. I don't care what you do, but you can't. Once you dive in, you do it till you're happy with it. If it takes you 4 years, like it took me, at some point you will get to where we are at, and you'll look back and you'll have forgotten all of the challenges. You'll have forgotten all those days when you wanted to quit, and you'll realize just how far you've came. I don't watch our early videos. I don't watch any of our videos. Once I put a video up, I never watch it again. I don't like, during the editing process, I spend enough time watching stuff. My objective is to make a better video next time. Okay. But when I do, every once in a while, when I do go back and watch an early video, there's two things that happen. First thing that happens is I laugh because I think about at that time I had no idea what I was getting into. Okay. And the second thing that I do is I get emotional, like I always do, because I realize just how far I've come. Okay. So my challenge to you is, if you decide to take this on, don't give yourself, quitting is easy. Okay. And if you're not careful, you'll look back on a life of quitting. Okay. And my challenge to you would be do whatever it to end up with what you're trying to. If it's a campsite, start there, because the more time you spend on that property, the more you will realize you can do more. And I'll tell you this much: the more you do, the more you work with your hands, the more you try to figure things out, the more you will realize you're capable. Okay, I didn't have all the skills, I suppose, to do what I've done, but I knew I could learn them. And so that's what I guess in conclusion, that's what I would say is, if you're gonna do it, if that's the property you want to do it on, then I've told my wife a half dozen times, I'm gonna finish this place or it's gonna kill me, and I'm okay with either one of them. And so there's this philosophy that if you get comfortable with the worst case scenario, if you get comfortable with the worst case scenario in your life, and you remind yourself the worst case scenario is whatever, right? I do that in business. I do that in business all the time. Okay, the worst case scenario in my life is I'm a plumber again. That's the worst case scenario. I have learned the skills and the trades. If YouTube goes away, if everything else goes away, the worst case scenario is I'm a plumber. Okay, we have so little debt that I can pay my bills comfortably as a plumber. I always made a good wage. I'd probably, truth, do better now as a plumber than I ever have because I have more experience. But get comfortable with the worst case scenario. But the other side of the coin is always try to improve your worst case scenario. Make that make your value go up in the world. I've never worked for minimum wage as an adult, right? Minimum wage is what I got paid when I had no skills. Okay, whether or not minimum wage is $10 an hour or $15 an hour, it doesn't matter to me. I make $100 an hour. Okay, so always improve the worst case scenario and don't quit. And you'll look back on your life, or somebody will remind you how far you've come at some point, and you'll realize that you
And I
did
think
something
that
unique, you did
everybody
something
could benefit
special.
from that for sure. And it has been a pleasure having you on. And you can find all of his links down in the description below to find him if you haven't. And I just want to thank everybody who has subscribed. I personally am coming up on 1,000 on YouTube, as well as just hit 10K on Instagram. So it's been quite a journey, coming from entertainment where the career really chose me. I didn't choose the career. Coming from business management, 3.8 GPA, Dean's List, met my business partner in a marketing class. Built his business over the past 4 years, and now I've gone independent. So I think, through entertainment, I'm really starting to get to do what I enjoy, whether or not that's fishing or anything. So if you guys don't mind, definitely go in the description, check out all of my content, all of the playlists. And once again, this was Anthony Marshall, and this was the Total Potential Podcast. Great.
Take care, buddy.
Awesome. All right,
Enjoyed it.
man. We'll talk soon. Have a good morning, and
Talk soon.
be safe.